The year is 1095. Beneath a sky thick with the scent of burnt offerings and devotion, Pope Urban II ignited a spark that would consume generations and reshape the world. His call for a holy war sent a torrent of humanity, armored knights, impoverished villagers, and fervent believers, streaming towards a destiny shrouded in uncertainty. Would it be the glory of heaven or the darkest depths of hell that awaited them? Absolution was the promise that propelled them forward. Their journey towards Jerusalem was a tapestry woven with threads of fervent piety and brutal devastation. Within that holy city, amidst the prayers of the faithful and the clang of weaponry, belief would be tested in a crucible of conflict, forging a legacy stained with blood. This marked the most intense phase of the First Crusade. Our narrative begins with the echoing pronouncements of Pope Urban II at the Council of Clermont in 1095. Imagine a vast assembly of the devout, their eyes ablaze with visions of divine purpose and the promise of earthly rewards. Pope Urban, more than a mere leader, became a herald of both spiritual salvation and worldly prosperity. He rallied them for a crusade to reclaim the Holy Land, and the offer of forgiveness for sins, a guaranteed passage to eternal salvation, proved an irresistible lure. For the knightly class, it meant opportunities for valor and the acquisition of treasure. For the peasantry, it offered a rare escape from the relentless cycle of poverty and arduous labor. A holy war was presented as the ultimate path to glory, a chance to transcend their difficult lives and earn God's favor. Yet beneath this powerful religious appeal lay the intricate machinations of political strategy. The Byzantine Emperor Alexios Komnenos had reached out to the west, seeking assistance against the encroaching Seljuk Turks. Pope Urban seized upon this plea, skillfully transforming it into a grand design of conquest. Europe, teeming with restive knights and overcrowded lands, was a volatile mixture, ripe for explosion. Urban's aim was to unite Christendom under a single divine purpose, redirecting internal discontent into a unified crusade. Those who committed were guaranteed the protection of their property back home and the certainty of divine compensation, fueling an enthusiasm for a journey destined to be etched into the annals of history. Thus commenced the massive mobilization towards the Holy Land, a movement that broke down social barriers, uniting nobles and serfs in a shared pursuit of faith and opportunity. The air vibrated with a strange mix of order and impending chaos. Knights meticulously prepared their armor, horses neighed restlessly, and peasants gripped their rudimentary weapons with grim determination. This was a pilgrimage promising both violence and piety, propelled by ambition and an unshakable belief in the righteousness of their holy cause. Ahead lay immense logistical hurdles, vast distances, the scarcity of resources, and the ever-present threat of disease loomed large. Many sacrificed their meager possessions, mortgaging their futures on the hope of divine endorsement. On the journey, the harsh realities they encountered tempered their initial zeal. Territorial lords demanded tolls for passage, and the landscape offered little sustenance. Still, the Crusaders pressed onward, driven by faith, social pressure, and the allure of adventure beyond the familiar confines of Europe. The Crusader army was a disparate collection of individuals with varied motivations. Knights, their armor gleaming from constant maintenance, saw the crusade as a test of their martial prowess and a fulfillment of their chivalric vows. The promise of land and wealth further intensified their fervor. Ordinary folk burdened by poverty viewed the crusade as a lifeline, a chance to escape hardship. For them, it was not merely an earthly undertaking, but a step towards improving their lot in this life and securing salvation in the next. Monks and fervent zealots joined, driven by deep conviction, viewing the journey as a sacred pilgrimage. Together, they faced a grueling expedition, bound by a mission that was simultaneously divine and deeply human. While religious fervor served as the unifying call, secular politics were deeply intertwined with this venture. The crusade allowed the papacy to expand its authority within a fragmented Christian world. Pope Urban II's call successfully diverted the attention of Western nobility from internal squabbles towards a common objective, asserting the Church's dominance in the turbulent medieval landscape. Monarchs, though outwardly supportive, also saw the potential for expanding their own territories in the East. Their backing was a calculated move within the power dynamics of the time. promising territories that could help quell dissent and reward loyalty. The interplay between church and crown was a complex dance, balancing support for the crusade with the pursuit of their own strategic goals. Practical preparation for the journey was paramount. Knights meticulously acquired weapons, sturdy horses, and necessary provisions. Swords and shields, carefully oiled and gleaming, were seen as instruments of divine will, while armor was forged with prayers. Beyond the material, spiritual preparation fortified the Crusaders. Ceremonies and rituals imbued their mission with sacred significance. Masses held before departure, the consecration of weapons, and crosses stitched onto their garments symbolized both their faith and their camaraderie. Relics were cherished as protective talismans, offering mystical reassurance on their long march to the Holy Land. Sacred vows bound the Crusaders together, pledges of devotion not merely written on parchment, but etched into their very souls. Breaking these oaths carried severe spiritual consequences. Redemption was promised only to those who remained committed, while tales of men returning, disgraced, or broken underscored the sacred gravity of the venture. In pursuing this holy cause, they accepted not only physical dangers, but also profound spiritual risks. To the Crusaders, the East loomed as a realm steeped in myth, populated by fantastical creatures and magical threats. Superstition colored their journey with a mix of fear and anticipation, leading them to envision maps dotted with imagined wonders and horrors. Practical encounters later dispelled some of these myths, though the sense of mysticism and a divine confrontation lingered. Miracles and relics provided spiritual sustenance amidst the grim realities of war. Their stories offered solace and reinforced the belief in divine favor. Yet alongside the genuine, fakes also proliferated, challenging the faith of some and blurring the line between the authentic and the false. As we conclude this segment, the fervor had swept through Europe, fueled by impassioned sermons and tales of both grand adventure and sacred duty. Every level of society buzzed with anticipation for this extraordinary blend of earthly obligation and heavenly quest. The crusade was more than just an expedition. It was a transformative crucible where countless destinies converged in a forge of faith and fire, leaving an indelible mark on the tapestry of history. In a time when the echoes of Pope Urban II's call resonated across Europe, a diverse multitude of knights, farmers, and even children set forth, propelled by the intoxicating promise of divine glory. Their path to Jerusalem was long and arduous, stretching across hostile and unfamiliar lands. This was a brutal reality for those whose dreams of salvation were built on a foundation of meager provisions. Initially buoyed by unwavering faith, many soon confronted the stark realization of their own vulnerability, as disease and starvation claimed far more lives than the enemies they sought to vanquish. The once lustrous armor of the knights grew dull with each grueling step, while the humble peasants, clinging desperately to hope, watched as the grains in their sacks dwindled, their fervent prayers mingling with the fading memory of the golden fields of their homeland. Their eastward journey was not only a physical trek, but also a profound cultural passage. They traversed lands that felt utterly alien, populated by voices speaking in tongues they could not comprehend. It was like stepping into another world, beneath skies alive with unfamiliar creatures and climates to which they were unaccustomed. Suspicion simmered between the Crusaders and the Byzantine Christians, their nominal allies by faith, but tentative companions separated by centuries of distrust and miscommunication. Yet these trials forged a fragile bond between them. As they forded rivers and scaled mountains, they left behind faint traces in the vast expanse of European memory, a trail of spent hope and the mournful laments whispered under starless skies. Almost immediately, hunger sank its relentless claws into their resolve. Ill-prepared for the long haul, their supplies dwindled with alarming speed. Foraging became not just a necessity, but a constant, exhausting struggle. What began as a quest driven by pious zeal morphed into a grim tale of survival, where meals were made from horses once considered companions, and meager scraps found along the way were treated as precious treasures. Desperation fueled discord, tearing at the bonds of camaraderie. Infighting among the ranks became commonplace, and suspicion ran as rampant as the untamed weeds along their path. Even so, When food was miraculously found, there was an unspoken understanding where the brutal beauty of human resilience intertwined with the ugliness of betrayal. Into this maelstrom of starvation emerged the crucible of infighting and fragmentation. Diverse tongues and varied customs clashed, transforming the Crusader army into a boiling pot of cultural rivalry and mutual distrust. Knights clung fiercely to their pride, while survival instincts governed the actions of those with fewer resources, resulting in power struggles and the shattering of dreams of unity. Leaders navigating the precarious line between personal ambition and collective responsibility found themselves consumed by conflict. Consequently, splinter groups broke away, seeking safer routes or quicker access to spoils. While this fragmentation made them vulnerable, these smaller factions sometimes succeeded where larger forces faltered, navigating obstacles with nimble precision. In the lands controlled by the Byzantine Empire, the Crusaders were viewed through a complex dual lens. Their martial prowess could either bolster or endanger Byzantine stability. This led to a pragmatic and often temporary acceptance of these unruly guests. Yet mistrust simmered just beneath the surface, erupting when Crusaders felt misled by Byzantine guides who offered longer, less direct paths. Perceived betrayals led to desperate raids on Byzantine lands by marauding, starving Crusaders. The alliance was a fragile dance, awkwardly threading together divine purpose with the harsh realities of realpolitik. And despite the persistent tension, it ultimately facilitated the Crusaders' eastward march. These same tensions had already exposed darker impulses as the Crusaders traversed Europe. The cities of the Rhineland bore witness to a surge of brutal violence, where Jewish communities, unfairly scapegoated, met tragic fates at the hands of these armed pilgrims. In the anxious alleyways, divine righteousness twisted into frenzied violence, perhaps occasionally prompting moments of reflection, mediation, or even introspection, though likely rarely. These horrific episodes revealed the toxic blend of religious fanaticism and earthly hatred, sparking another rift within the already divided Crusader forces. The People's Crusade, engulfed in fanatical chaos, starkly diverged from the more strategic Prince's Crusade. Desperation created a desperate need for plunder, driving the beleaguered Crusaders further and further from their initially noble mission. Raiding swiftly transformed from an unfortunate necessity into a currency that dictated their very survival. As their boots trampled fields and stormed fortifications, their path became a paradoxical embodiment of Holy War's inherent contradictions. The once clear road to Jerusalem dissolved into a litany of ethical dilemmas. Each raid and seized provision drew a dark line beneath their real and imagined exodus. No bounty went unexamined, no town remained unplundered, and as the shadows of pragmatism lengthened, the sanctity of their mission became ever more indistinct. As they finally entered Asia Minor, the deeper terrains presented new mysteries amidst old tensions. Between the endless deserts and formidable mountain ranges, they contended with Turkic adversaries and the ever-present, watchful eyes of enemies, both real and imagined. Days were a constant battle against nature. Nights were marked by hymns whispered under star-studded cloaks. Ambushes, shifts in climate, and shortages of supplies mapped out a relentless warfare waged on both tactical and spiritual fronts. Divinity remained a constant companion, even as the stark resonance of survival dictated strategies born of desperation. Ultimately, a victorious few stood at the gates of Jerusalem. The survivors bore witness to the dual toll paid by both flesh and spirit. Scars marked their skin, and shadows trailed their gazes, etched with the memories of faces left behind. Hardened by deprivation, those who reached Jerusalem teetered between exultation and exhaustion. Their trials were now a cornerstone of whispered lore and shared tales. And before them lay the city, a bastion of divine dreams, awaiting the penultimate chapter of their harrowing yet hallowed story. In June 1099, the weary Crusaders finally caught sight of Jerusalem's silhouette. Their journey had been long and arduous, fueled by the promise of divine forgiveness and glory. The vision of the holy city's walls on the horizon, seemingly impregnable and steeped in antiquity, was both invigorating and daunting, a soul-stirring moment of historical juxtaposition. Pilgrims, now hardened warriors clad in armor, stood ready, driven by spiritual desperation as their former lives seemed to vanish in the dust behind them. But these walls, fortified and manned by the determined Fatimid defenders, were far more than a mere formality. To conquer them would demand more than faith alone. It would require unparalleled resolve. Standing on the threshold of their spiritual destination, the Crusaders confronted an awe-inspiring realization. The city, a vibrant center of religious and cultural life, felt simultaneously like a powerful symbol in an alien world. Its defenses, honed by centuries of siege, were prepared for righteous invaders, manned by men who understood the stakes involved. Inside the Muslim garrison, alongside the Jewish and Christian civilians, the tremors of the impending siege were felt, acutely aware that battle, starvation, and unspeakable horrors loomed. Jerusalem's fortifications were truly imposing, a blend of stone and history standing defiantly against the waiting Crusaders. These sturdy ramparts had withstood countless invaders throughout the ages, their defenders united under the Fatimid banner for a singular, crucial mission. With faith inextricably linked to their martial duty, they prepared for the coming onslaught. Weapons ready and spirits steeled, the mosques echoed with the sounds of prayer, each call mingling with the war horns, creating a defiant harmony against their adversaries. For the Crusaders, the sheer weight of this formidable defense felt like a physical and spiritual mountain to ascend. As the siege unfolded, the harsh reality of their predicament bore down heavily on the Crusaders. Their numbers, though substantial, paled in comparison to the challenges posed by Jerusalem's defenses. Siegecraft demanded more than brute strength. It required cunning strategy, meticulous logistics, and sheer, unyielding determination. Supplies dwindled, stretching their meager resources thin as the relentless sun drained their resolve. Forced to scavenge from the unforgiving land, survival hinged on ingenuity and unwavering faith. A cruel test endured beneath a relentless sky. Yet within Jerusalem, the defenders expertly capitalized on their strengths, fortified by their numbers and intimate knowledge of the city's secrets. Their understanding of the landscape informed strategic decisions, allowing them to fortify weak points and manage supplies with deft efficiency. The defenders were unified by a shared cause and a profound sense of spiritual duty, rallying everyone within the city to resist the siege. The complexity of their internal unity proved to be their strongest defense, highlighting shared aspirations amidst the escalating chaos. Among the Crusaders, alliances were as multifaceted as a woven tapestry. Nobles and commoners, knights and foot soldiers, aligned under a multitude of languages, traditions, and motivations. Such diversity demanded skilled leadership as leaders navigated ambitious rivalries to forge a cohesive front. Similarly, within Jerusalem, the garrison organized efforts to integrate Muslim defenders with the city's residents, their unity and diversity offering resilience and blending their collective strength into effective resistance. Outnumbered and increasingly desperate, the Crusaders resorted to cunning tactics, from setting fires to devising intricate feints designed to confound the defenders. Each discovered weakness in the city's fortifications ignited a flicker of hope. Meanwhile, the city's defenders utilized their advantage, their intimate knowledge of Jerusalem's geography, sharpening their responses to Crusader movements and reinforcing their strategies with unwavering determination. Siege warfare is as much a battle of the mind as it is of the body. Crusaders faced intense psychological torment, doubts clinging like shadows as they strained against Jerusalem's formidable defenses. Their faith, simultaneously a burden and a buoy, nurtured perseverance while magnifying their anxieties. Jerusalem's defenders also endured their psychological crucible. The terrifying specter of potential slaughter haunted windows and doorframes, fostering allegiance to both faith and city amidst fervent prayers and internal questions about divine will. The natural environment added yet another layer of complexity to the siege. The fierce midday sun, once a reassuring companion, became their adversary, sapping morale under its relentless heat. Jerusalem's arid land yielded little sustenance, crushing the Crusaders' spirits as water remained an almost unattainable luxury. Hostility was dictated by the elemental command within the city. Water was a precious, gold-standard resource, with rainwater jealously rationed and every single drop considered invaluable. The siege was as unyielding as Jerusalem's determination to outlast it, a war waged against both man and nature. For centuries, Jerusalem had stood as a spiritual beacon, a city of profound significance to people of the book. Its streets, paved with yearning and history, resonated far beyond the siege itself. Defending its sacred ground engaged deep-rooted tensions and aspirations. To both the Crusaders and the defenders, the city was not merely a physical prize, but an ethereal monument of immense spiritual weight. In the shadow of such profound significance, each action, and even each breath, fully embraced the city's cosmic dimension, manifesting fervent hopes and clearly illuminated fears. Throughout the siege, diplomacy struggled to find a foothold amidst the relentless clamor. Sporadic negotiations hinted at desperate avenues for peace, hindered by vast differences in language, religion, and territorial claims. As promises eroded under the fury of warfare, dreams of deliverance, both earthly and divine, flickered amid speeches and charismatic pronouncements. Spoken agreements mingled with lingering tension, hopes rising and collapsing, with shifting allegiances and the inevitable, crushing advance of conflict. In the shadowy hours before the final confrontation, desperation spurred both camps into a flurry of last-minute preparations. Rituals blended with unwavering resolve, strengthened by faith. As siege towers loomed ominously and hearts pounded in readiness for battle, Jerusalem's defenders embraced the coming trial with just as much fervor. Prayers were whispered alongside concrete strategies. Both sides understood that the siege was not merely a fight for survival, but a complex chapter that would echo through history, forever altering the city at its heart. Beneath the harsh embrace of the midday sun, the Crusaders endured a relentless ordeal outside the sun-baked walls of Jerusalem. With each passing day, the earth beneath their feet seemed to drain away their strength, offering not a trace of moisture in return. Dehydration shattered them like a silent adversary, while the Fatimid defenders, safely fortified within the city, clung tightly to all nearby water sources, leaving the besiegers to grapple with the desolate conditions. It was a grim landscape, where every drop of water was hoarded like precious treasure, and hope felt as porous as the dry soil. Through sheer desperation, the Crusaders began to exploit the land's sparse offerings to their advantage. They scoured the earth for hidden wells, licked the dew from leaves, and even resorted to consuming the blood of fallen animals. All the while, they scanned the skies, searching for a merciful rain cloud. Convinced that their suffering was a divine test, even as their bodies cried out for relief, the minds and hands of the Crusader force remained alive with tenacious ingenuity. They became builders, crafting the very engines of their salvation amidst the ruins of sacred sites. Churches and abandoned structures provided the planks they desperately needed. Without hesitation, they repurposed the sanctified wood into weapons of war, built to breach the ancient walls that barred their way. In this barren wilderness, utterly devoid of natural timber, their craftsmanship became a profound expression of their faith and their desperate resolve. Each measured cut and hammered nail was simultaneously an act of pragmatic engineering and a spiritual endeavor, geared towards a holy fulfillment, no matter the cost. The scent of sweat and toil mingled with the dust of the encampments as the devout warriors envisioned every burden and blessing of their mission as intricately intertwined. Each piece of artillery and every towering siege tower became a conduit for prayer, their labor feeling solemn, almost sacramental. This was more than just conflict. Each act of creation was twinned with profound spiritual devotion, binding the warriors together through a shared belief that every hardship brought them a step closer to divine blessing. Despite their depleted state, they were fueled by a powerful vision of spiritual conquest, driven by the collective promise of delivering Jerusalem into Christian hands. Morality found itself adrift at the edge of desperation. As resources vanished and exhaustion spread like a suffocating fog, whispers crept through the camp. Tales of survival that painted a chilling portrait of human nature, unbound by civilized norms. Starvation pitted man against the grim constraints of survival's dark lottery, where discarded remnants and even the fallen became subjects of grim necessity. Leaders worked tirelessly against this internal decay, constantly urging the Crusaders to keep sight of their divine goal, to withstand the siege not only of Jerusalem's physical walls, but also of their own souls. Yet, looming above this portrayal of grim defiance were the siege towers, wheeled titans constructed from the labor of beleaguered faith and scarce resources. These towers stood as defiant testaments to human ingenuity and stubborn resilience. Priests consecrated them before leading these wooden giants toward the city's walls, symbolizing not just martial might, but a spiritual determination to overcome any obstacle separating them from redemption. Each tower was a monumental gamble against adversity, built on a scale intended to both intimidate the enemy and inspire their own ranks. As they drew near, the Crusaders murmured prayers and battle cries in a synchronized chant of divine will. For the warriors within, these moments felt like the tangible manifestation of prophecy. Each soldier, anointed by faith, transformed into a willing instrument of celestial decree, chanting Deus Vult as they stormed forward, embodying an almost otherworldly aura, cloaked in chainmail, with eyes lifted towards heaven. They advanced with the unwavering conviction of those who view their violence as righteous, whose every act is woven into the narrative of a sacred mission. Their swords swung with the terrible weight of judgment, their steps synchronized to the pounding rhythms of holy fervor, injecting life and ambition into the creaking motions of their siege engines. From behind the city's ancient defenses, the Fatimid garrison embodied a different aspect of spiritual warfare. A low hum of urgency resonated from within Jerusalem. Each warrior, whether soldier, merchant, or innocent, was linked by the shared purpose of preserving their sacred home. The sacred walls offered both strength and a constant, powerful reminder of what they stood to lose. Their mantra invoked divine protection, weaving faith into their every move and every strategic decision, creating a shield of belief against the invaders' onslaught. Caught in the churn of opposing spiritual aims, the battlefield transcended mere physical combat. This was a collision of creeds. Each side was illuminated by its particular theology, entwined in a panorama of palpable fervor. Prayers rose amidst volleys of arrows and stones, mingling with the relentless din of battle, transforming the combat into a revelatory enterprise. In this charged theater of war, humanity's essence lay exposed, stripped bare to the primal instincts of valor and malice. The noble and the ignoble intertwined in their ancient, brutal dance. Days gave way to restless nights, time ticking away in a tense balance as both sides clung desperately to hope and unwavering resolve. Crusaders and defenders alike waited for the inevitable break in the storm, heartbeats synchronized to the ticking of destiny's final measure. The siege held them captive at the precipice of history's unfolding, where the legacy of each moment eagerly awaited its rendering. In the looming dawn, a climax forged from the determination and devotion of men lay like a heavy shadow over Jerusalem, waiting to be etched into the chronicles of time. The siege of Jerusalem stretched each participant to their absolute limit. Inside the city, anxious whispers mingled with the heavy, tense air as the defenders reinforced their resolve behind the ancient walls. Outside, the Crusaders, weary from the relentless confrontation with scorching heat and gnawing hunger, gazed up at the formidable ramparts that had withstood countless sieges throughout centuries. It was the night of July 14th, 1089, when they perceived a long-awaited opportunity. Exhausted yet filled with a fervent urgency, the Crusaders prepared to breach these storied city defenses. Armed with siege towers and battering rams hastily cobbled together from scavenged wood, they were propelled by an unwavering conviction in their divine mission. The air was thick with tension and a quiet, creeping dread as hearts steeled themselves for the coming chaos. Inside the besieged city, anticipation mingled with an ever-growing sense of dread. The defenders, motivated by survival and the profound sacredness of their home, knew their resilience was being tested to its absolute breaking point with each passing day. Supplies were dwindling, and the morale of the Fatimid troops wavered under the ceaseless pressure. Yet with every sunrise, they found renewed strength in a shared faith and in the unyielding nature of their beloved Jerusalem's walls. But on the morning of July 15th, the persistent pounding of a battering ram finally succeeded where countless other attempts had failed. A crack echoed like a grim omen throughout the city. It was the beginning of the end. As the sun reached its zenith, the walls finally gave way. Crusaders poured through the breach like a raging torrent, their victorious cries mingling with the terrified screams of Jerusalem's inhabitants. What should have been a battle instead devolved into a frenzied, indiscriminate slaughter. Overwhelmed by a righteous fury and the deeply held belief that they were fulfilling a holy mandate, they plundered the city with reckless abandon. The sanctity of their initial quest was utterly overshadowed by the sheer brutality of their actions. In the narrow, winding streets and the broader plazas, the boundaries between soldier and civilian, warrior and bystander, dissolved amidst the engulfing chaos. The air was thick with the heart-wrenching cries of those caught in the whirlwind of indiscriminate violence. Men, women, children, and the elderly found themselves targeted by unrestrained cruelty. Paneled doors were splintered and violently thrown open. Treasures were hoarded, and inconceivable acts were committed that would forever tarnish the city's sacred reputation. Wealth was seized not merely as spoils of war, but as emblems of their long-awaited triumph. Yet even as they reveled in a victory stained with sacrilege, some Crusaders paused, momentarily haunted by the sheer scale of the devastation they had unleashed upon a city they had deemed holy. The trauma of this conquest spared no one, sparking a tragic theater where faith became inextricably entwined with uncontrollable fury. In the midst of this hellish nightmare, Muslims defending their homes crumbled alongside the city's physical defenses. The Crusaders in their bloodlust seemed to see no difference between the crescent and the cross, or even the Star of David. Jews were herded into synagogues, only to perish as fires consumed the buildings. Local Christians also faced grim fates, often mistaken for Muslims in the whirlwind of indiscriminate violence that swept through their city. For the Crusaders, this unleashing of violence was not mere bloodlust, but a euphoric, though terribly misdirected, spiritual ecstasy. They saw themselves as penitent pilgrims, fulfilling a divine purpose through each act of violence, seizing Jerusalem not only for earthly glory, but for celestial reward. They were in this fevered moment both pious warriors and harbingers of brutal, divinely sanctioned retribution. Every street they trudged through, every adversary struck down, felt like a step nearer to divine redemption. As the dust began to settle and the clamor diminished, the echoes of what had transpired in Jerusalem hung heavily over its battered streets. Chroniclers and historians would later whisper of this ferocity, cautioning future generations about the dangers of zealotry mistaken for true salvation. The Crusaders departed having claimed a city, but at a profound cost to their own humanity. They experienced an uneasy triumph, forever marked by the somber reality of a ravaged Jerusalem. Yet this bloody conquest, echoing with the hollow tolls of victory and mingling with the cries of anguish, lingered far beyond the city's walls. Jerusalem's streets, drenched in blood and wrath, bore the indelible marks of a sacred siege that had devolved into something undeniably profane. As sunlit hours ticked forward, the freshly conquered city stood as a chilling testament to both a divine mission and devastating bloodshed. It was a legacy that would haunt both the conquerors and the vanquished for generations to follow. Survivors of this dark chapter, both the victors and those who lay beneath their heel, faced a new dawn upon a city forever altered. The once resilient Jerusalem lay quiet, wrapped in a tense calm. For the Crusaders, there was now an empire to ignite anew, a holy realm to nurture from the ashes of devastation. Subtle murmurs of regret were woven into the fabric of prayers that sought forgiveness and understanding, driving communities to wrestle with the enormity of what had transpired. This violent breach and hard-won victory had indeed brought Jerusalem under the aegis of the cross, but it bore witness to a sobering paradox, one of faith, conquest, and a brutal compromise. The breaching of Jerusalem's walls marked the transformation of a bastion of resistance into a macabre stage of chaos. Crusaders, a wild mix of exhausted knights and determined peasants, spilled into the city with a fury stoked by promises of redemption and the alluring prospect of spoils. The cobblestones echoed with the savage clang of swords as sheer madness took hold. They struck out indiscriminately at anyone in their path, erasing the line between combatant and civilian, driven by a dangerous blend of zealotry and desperation. Smoke from burning structures stained the sky a hellish red, reflecting the sheer brutality unleashed by those who had once envisioned themselves as heralds of salvation. In the very heart of this slaughter lay the Temple Mount, a site revered by both Jews and Muslims. Its sacred enclave offered no sanctuary from the Crusaders' wrath. Amidst the desperate cries of those seeking refuge, the Dome of the Rock bore witness to unthinkable violence, its holy walls echoing with the screams of those who had gathered within, seeking a safety that would never come. Chroniclers spoke of blood flowing in torrents, an image that, while likely exaggerated, powerfully captured the essence of the disaster. The Temple Mount massacre was more than just a destruction of life. It signified a profound rupture in the shared sacredness of a place intended for prayer and peace, now irrevocably tainted by bloodshed. Fires deliberately set by the Crusaders did more than just raze the physical structures. They symbolized the erasure of an intricate cultural tapestry. Sacred monuments, homes, and businesses alike fed the flames, their combined stench of burning wood and flesh hanging thick in the medieval air. The devastation was absolute, a catastrophic loss that reduced rich histories and vibrant communities to ash under the guise of conquest. No simple delineation of victor or vanquished can adequately convey the true tragedy of a city once pulsating with diversity, now smoldering in uniform devastation. In this crucible of ruin, strangely incongruent moments unfolded. Crusader priests conducted mass amidst the still smoldering debris, their prayers mingling with the acrid smell of smoke. To the weary combatants, these rituals offered divine confirmation of their brutal acts and served as a fleeting balm in a harsh reality. This stark contrast highlighted the peculiar contradictions inherent in their faith, where violence and piety coexisted in a bewildering dance. The juxtaposition of supposed divine grace amidst grotesque carnage lent an unsettling layer to the Crusaders' quest, faith and fervor masking deeply disquieting deeds. Lost in this grand narrative of conquest are the countless nameless souls who perished or simply vanished into history's shadows. Chroniclers primarily captured the fervor and achievements of the Crusaders, rarely pausing to mourn the unnamed victims. Their stories remain largely untold, their voices unheard, swallowed by the resounding echoes of a conquest deemed divine. Yet whispers of their existence survive in fragmented letters, remote merchant accounts, and the quiet void left by their absence, subtly challenging history's often glorified narrative. Inside the breached city, the irony was chilling. Crusaders who had sworn allegiance to the principles of love and mercy under Christianity wrought terrible havoc upon holy sites, committing acts utterly antithetical to their professed beliefs. The dark contradiction of a holy war, a concept already steeped in irony as they supposedly waged peace through violence, is nowhere more apparent than in the siege of Jerusalem. Even as their victory was celebrated, doubt simmered within the Christian world about the righteousness of their path. This was a silent testament to the harsh absurdity that underscored the First Crusade. Despite the overwhelming chaos, class distinctions significantly shaped the unfolding tragedy. Nobles and affluent figures on both sides often maneuvered for survival, their fates frequently influenced by alliances or outright bribery, underscoring the persistent grip of social hierarchies, even amidst widespread destruction. For the less fortunate, survival was a luxury afforded by a cruelly arbitrary fate, exposing the persistent social stratification that influenced life and death in such medieval maelstroms. The thin veneer of spiritual conquest peeled away to reveal the sobering realities endured by the nameless, who perished or barely survived the torrid aftermath. The atrocities witnessed in Jerusalem reverberated throughout history, serving as a chilling prefiguration of the conflicts that followed and inspiring equally brutal retaliations. This event etched a template for the ferocity that would characterize future crusades, with the massacre serving as a dire warning about the terrifying depths of human cruelty when cloaked in a divine mandate. As the stories of the massacre traversed lands and centuries, they inflamed tensions, burying the dream of a unified Holy Land under the rubble of deep distrust and enduring enmity. History took note, its lessons persisting despite cultural glosses and purposeful forgetting. In the wake of the assault, chroniclers offered varied portrayals, ranging from glorified accounts of divine victory to somber chronicles of relentless bloodlust. Each account reflected unique biases, the meeting point of sincere belief and strategic narrative. Chroniclers like Fulcher of Chartres celebrated the supposed righteousness of the crusade while often downplaying or omitting the excesses of the Crusaders, demonstrating the medieval chroniclers' aim to blend truth with spiritual or political agendas. The siege of Jerusalem remains a poignant point of reflection on the labyrinthine past of religious and cultural discord. Amidst this tale of ruin, the capacity for resilience quietly endured. The massacre was also a testament to survival against overwhelming odds. As the city slowly emerged from the rubble, new rulers took charge, writing narratives of endurance as the smoldering ruin gradually gave way to a fragile rebirth. This brutal chapter is not merely a story of conquest, but also of humanity's remarkable capacity to endure, adapt, and rise from the ashes, forging hope and tenacity amidst bleakness. It stands as a testament to the enduring human spirit, safeguarding the fragile continuum of civilization. In the immediate aftermath of the siege, Jerusalem stood in haunting silence. A city once teeming with vibrant life now echoed only with the faint whispers of its recent devastation. The cobbled streets, which had previously hummed with the diverse clamor of everyday activities, fell eerily quiet, interrupted only occasionally by the resolute footsteps of a new ruler or the quiet sobs of those who had miraculously survived. In this hushed, altered landscape, the surviving residents began the slow, agonizing task of stitching together the shattered threads of their lives. Families had been ripped apart, homes lay in ruins, and the once tight-knit fabric of their community was torn asunder. Each survivor carried the heavy weight of grief, shame, and a deep-seated, pervasive fear. Amidst the city's ruins, life continued in a state of obscurity for those fortunate, or perhaps unfortunate, enough to have lived through the siege. Many had hidden in dark cellars or narrow, cramped tunnels, desperately hoping to escape the chaos and terror raging outside. Emerging from these hiding places, they found their world forever altered. The psychological scars from those days were etched deep into their minds, never fully fading. For the city's Muslim and Jewish populations, the memory of that brutal July day was inescapably seared into their memories, a constant, painful reminder of lost normalcy and a need for unflagging vigilance against the conqueror's watchful eyes. Yet for many, survival came with a terrible cost: enslavement. Crusaders, seeking spoils for their perilous journey, seized captives to labor for them or sold them far from their homes. For these individuals, the sorrow of missing one's homeland was rivaled only by the crushing despair of forced servitude. Families were torn apart, scattered into servitude, their futures veiled in agonizing uncertainty. Enslavement in this era was a harsh, unyielding fate, brutally stripping away individual identities and reducing people to mere possessions of those who held power over them. Still, even amidst such bleakness, hope found a way to persevere. The enslaved built silent, clandestine communities, whispering stories of resilience and offering comfort wherever possible. Among the chains, tales of resistance and profound humanity circulated, a testament to the unquenchable spirit of those determined to cling onto their past and their personhood at any cost. Nevertheless, history's ink too often skips over those whose stories were not written by the victors. The siege left countless voices unheard, their experiences unrecorded, consigned to time's indifferent shadows. For the ordinary souls of Jerusalem, the farmers, the craftsmen, the shopkeepers, a veil of silence obscures the reality of their lives before the Crusaders appeared. Their untold tales of panic, perseverance, and loss are largely absent from chronicles, which are dominated by the narratives of royalty and conquest. Yet these lost stories survive in oral traditions carried across generations, capturing fleeting glimpses of resilience amidst unimaginable hardship. Through these narratives, the everyday courage and humanity that shone through the darkest hours endure. Simple acts of kindness offer quiet whispers of hope in times of profound despair. Though neglected by official records, these unheard voices significantly enrich our understanding of the siege's true, complex human narrative. Interestingly, even amidst the savagery, slivers of compassion emerged like rare blooms in a barren desert. Not all crusaders were driven solely by greed or fanatical zeal. Some, perhaps guided by personal codes of chivalry or a shared sense of humanity, extended their protection to civilians. Knights like Tancred of Normandy famously placed their banners over revered sites like the Al-Aqsa Mosque to protect those inside. Such gestures, while not entirely selfless or pure, reveal that even during such heartless times, humanity could manifest in small acts of mercy. These instances, though sparse, add complexity to the simplistic portrayal of Crusaders solely as ruthless invaders. The chaos of conquest led many of Jerusalem's inhabitants to simply vanish from history's sight. Some fled ahead of the invaders, seeking shelter in safer lands. Others vanished amidst the upheaval of the siege itself, their destinies forever unknown. For those who remained, obscurity became an unintended strategy for survival. Their stories remind us of the many lives that remain unrecorded, encouraging historians to seek traces in archaeology or oral lore to rebuild these fragmented narratives. These uncharted experiences form an essential part of understanding the siege's immense, multifaceted impact on the human tapestry. The siege shattered more than just lives. Sacred places, invaluable manuscripts, and religious relics central to Jerusalem's cultural soul were desecrated. The Temple Mount, a site synonymous with faith, was marred by bloodshed, leaving lasting scars on both the Islamic and Jewish spiritual consciousness. Beyond the physical ruin, the communal rituals that had sustained generations unraveled, leaving spiritual voids in their wake. Efforts to patch together this torn spiritual and cultural fabric faced immense challenges. Yet slowly, leadership emerged from the ashes, determined to reclaim and redefine their identities. Though the peoples of Jerusalem slowly rebuilt their lives and rekindled urban vibrancy, the memories of the siege's horrors lingered. Their resilience was tempered by caution as the experience of survival left its unmistakable mark on their future cultural landscapes. Ultimately, the siege of Jerusalem represents not just a singular, devastating episode, but an event that reverberated through centuries. For those impacted and their descendants, this ordeal symbolizes both humanity's lowest depths and the profound resilience required to climb out. The narratives of suffering, survival, and adaptation extended far beyond the city's walls, becoming embedded within both the Islamic and Christian worlds as fundamental elements of collective identity. Acknowledging these unseen stories unravels the complex human truths hidden behind the spectacle of war, encouraging a more holistic understanding that honors entwined histories and resonates through time. In those tumultuous days following the conquest of Jerusalem, Godfrey of Bouillon emerges not as a king crowned in glory, but as a leader of a different, perhaps more complex stripe. Amidst the dust and echoes of battle, he consciously avoids the title of king, striking a resonant chord with a declaration that echoed deeply within the Crusader ranks. He famously declared that he would not wear a crown of gold in the very city where Christ had worn a crown of thorns. This refusal, both poignant and profoundly symbolic, resonated among the Crusaders. It epitomized their aspirational humility and their unwavering devotion to faith over earthly power. It was also a calculated stance, a pragmatic move to maintain harmony among the volatile ranks of knights, nobles, and zealots. Entrusted with the title of Advocate of the Holy Sepulchre, Godfrey represented a curious blend of deep faith and astute pragmatism, excelling in leadership without the heavy traditional trappings of monarchical power. He skillfully navigated the tightrope between spiritual reverence and practical authority, asserting his influence in ways true to the complexities of his era, overseeing strategy, fortifying the Crusaders' grasp on the city, and stabilizing the fledgling Latin kingdom, placed him in a role akin to kingship, even as he politely excused himself from the formal title. In the immediate aftermath of Jerusalem's conquest, Godfrey plunged into the labyrinthine challenge of securing a battered city, now housing an uneasy mix of victorious invaders and the vanquished local population. His task extended far beyond mere military might, involving a painstaking reorganization effort that transformed Jerusalem into a fortified defensive bastion. The sword now had to share the space with the plow, and the city's robust defenses, diligently rejuvenated under his guidance, were crucial in ensuring the Crusaders' precarious grip held fast against any potential retaliations. Yet beyond the battlements, he faced the monumental task of attempting to knit fragmented communities into some semblance of order. Diverse Christian factions, burdened by ancient grudges and differing theological views, and a populace of Muslims and Jews, deeply scarred by the carnage of the siege, converged under Godfrey's pragmatic rule. It was here that his measured and consolidating leadership style began to sow the administrative seeds of a kingdom poised precariously on the edge of the Christian world. This was a world whose holy lands they now claimed by divine right. Godfrey's aversion to assuming the title of king carried significant religious resonances, underscoring the powerful spiritual undercurrents that had propelled the First Crusade. His assumption of the title Advocate of the Holy Sepulchre explicitly affirmed his allegiance to the sacred mission of safeguarding Christianity's most hallowed precincts. This act, deeply laced with piety, reverberated powerfully among the Crusader ranks, coloring their conquest not merely as territorial acquisition, but as a divinely sanctioned validation of their efforts. The ensuing theological discussions probed whether this move truly signified genuine humility or a clever masterstroke designed to quell potential discord and rivalry among the desperate European forces. Standing at the nexus of European and Eastern aspirations, Godfrey had to navigate a complex web of allegiances, constantly striving for cohesion among factions fueled by varying loyalties and often conflicting interests. The Crusaders themselves were a motley assembly of knights, nobles, and peasants, each deeply entrenched in their regional agendas, challenging him to unite this fractious cadre into a coherent and unified front. Internally, he had to foster a fragile equilibrium. Externally, he contended with the powerful European monarchies and the papacy, whose political calculations weighed heavily on Jerusalem's newborn rule. Beyond the city's immediate borders, Godfrey's reign as the de facto ruler of Jerusalem positioned him at the pivotal crossroads of cultural and religious interactions. The psychological and physical aftermath of the siege loomed large, its violent legacy casting a long shadow that stretched far beyond the kingdom's nascent borders. For the Islamic world, the occupation of Jerusalem emerged not merely as a military loss, but as a profound and deeply offensive religious affront. Its repercussions colored relations with a bitter tinge of enmity that would echo for centuries. Meanwhile, within the city's walls, Godfrey's delicate dance of governance involved managing a multicultural mosaic. The Muslim and Jewish communities, left reeling from the carnage of the siege, found their coexistence with the new rulers a difficult test of endurance and adaptability. Efforts to integrate native Christians into the structures of the Latin Kingdom reflected attempts to bridge yawning cultural chasms, even as the harsh realities of occupation, military presence, the imposition of new legal systems, and the prioritization of Christian religious sites bred persistent tensions and resentment. These dynamics underscore Godfrey's deft, though often challenged, handling of a socio-political cockpit rife with contradictions. The siege, an indelible foundation built on blood and brutality, bore heavily on Godfrey's governance. The shadow of conquest lingered within Jerusalem, its halls echoing with the specter of loss and the brutal birth of a beleaguered kingdom. However, history, ever eager to shape narratives, often penned a more romanticized portrayal of Godfrey, casting him in a clear, almost legendary light as a hero of piety, a symbolic paragon of the Crusader dream. Chroniclers and poets immortalized him, clothing his legend in the virtues of chivalry and steadfast faith. Here, the ironic dance of myth and reality played out, even as his capable rule attempted to counter the chaos with opportunities for stability and growth. Furthermore, under Godfrey's stewardship, Jerusalem's status as a haven for pilgrims rapidly expanded. Pilgrims flocked to the city in increasing numbers, drawn by faith and curiosity, their numbers bolstered by the renewed sanctity of sites like the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. This influx not only enriched the city's sacred aura, but also fueled the kingdom's spirit and economy through the growth of inns, markets, and related services. Godfrey served as both sovereign and sentinel, guiding and protecting the hallowed places under his care, binding his legacy ever more tightly to the religious fabric of the city. To examine Godfrey's tenure is to peer through a prism of paradoxes. His reign, forged in the crucible of conquest, gave rise to a ruler who masterfully blended pragmatism with piety, strength with subtle diplomacy. His rejection of a royal crown cloaked him in both apparent humility and strategic acumen, charting a course that delicately balanced secular leadership with profound spiritual fervor. As time transmuted his story into legend, Godfrey became a monument to the complex power plays, intricate dances of influence, and enduring legacies that are emblematic of a medieval world that refuses to fade quietly into forgotten pages. The chroniclers of the First Crusade faced the monumental task of portraying the siege of Jerusalem, a brutal clash of grim reality with perceived divine purpose. Some chroniclers, armed with a blend of vivid imagination and unwavering conviction, describe the violence with a sense of almost sacred triumph. They viewed the bloodshed as an act of divine will, painting the Crusaders as holy instruments, as if God himself had guided their swords in the slaughter. To them, these were not merely warriors, but chosen vessels, fulfilling a heavenly mission to cleanse and reclaim the holy city from infidel hands. This narrative offered an intoxicating reassurance that even in the seas of blood, where faith met steel, heaven's justice ultimately prevailed. Yet amidst these tales of divine glory, there also lay a darker, more unsettled reflection. Other chroniclers, perhaps overwhelmed by the horrific sights and sounds of the devastation, recorded the events with a profound sense of horror, a sobering counterpoint to the chorus of triumph. These writers touched upon a searing moral conflict, echoing the inner struggles of those who fought. Could their proclaimed divine mission truly justify such unrestrained and widespread slaughter? The question hung heavy in the air, much like the acrid smoke that mingled with the dusty winds sweeping across the scarred cityscape. Back in Europe, news of Jerusalem's capture rippled through the land, arriving like a deluge, bringing with it a mixture of triumph and trepidation. Many celebrated the victory as a clear, celestial endorsement of their faith and efforts. Churches rang with the joyous clamor of bells, the air filled with hymns as hearts swelled with newfound religious fervor. It was as if God had indeed reached down to assert his favor upon the Christian world, renewing their faith with a triumphant return of the holy city. The echoes of cheer resonated across villages and castles, amidst hearty feasts and fervent prayers. However, beneath this widespread jubilation, shadows of doubt began to flicker and lengthen. Whispers of unease crept through the corridors of power and piety alike. Could such widespread carnage truly align with the core teachings of Christ, who preached love and mercy? The brutal spectacle of violence in Jerusalem challenged deeply held beliefs, prompting some thinkers to ponder whether a holy war, with all its inherent bloodshed, could ever truly be reconciled with the essence of Christianity. These murmurs signaled the subtle beginning of a delicate and complex dialogue, one that tested the very moral and spiritual fabric of medieval European society. While the echoes of triumph rang throughout Europe, shockwaves shuddered through the Islamic world with an intensity from which nightmares are born. Stories of massacre and desecration spread rapidly from Spain to Persia, leaving a bitter taste of betrayal and a profound sense of urgency. The sight of sacred sites defiled, the invaders' religious zeal marking their path of devastation, stirred ancient wells of anger, grief, and unwavering resolve. The siege of Jerusalem became far more than just a military defeat. It was a powerful call to unity among divided factions, a rallying cry against a new, formidable disturbance emanating from the West. In mosques and homes across the Islamic world, scholars and poets memorialized the siege, weaving its harsh lessons into the enduring tapestry of Islamic memory. It forged an identity bound by resistance and a renewed spiritual consciousness, leaving an indelible scar that would galvanize and embolden future generations to seek redress. Yet as stories from Jerusalem were passed down through the generations, they mingled with existing memories, fostering a complex mix of emotions and motivations, sometimes leaning towards an urge for reconciliation, at other times fueling a burning desire for resistance. The siege also ignited intense theological debates among Christian thinkers. Some engaged in heated discussions, drawing parallels to biblical notions of divine wrath and retribution. They framed the bloodshed as a regrettably necessary act within the grand theater of salvation. A brutal purge needed to set the stage for a new divine order. But opposing notes of introspection arose, urging a fundamental reevaluation of the Crusades' very legitimacy. These voices, quietly at first, began to examine the Church's endorsement of violence, questioning if purely spiritual aims could ever justify such extremity. This burgeoning dialogue hinted at deeper, perhaps irreparable cracks forming between the realms of politics and faith, an awakening of contemplation that would ripple through the folds of history. With the passage of time, the memory of Jerusalem's siege transformed, simultaneously cherished and discarded, depending on whose thread was used to weave the narrative. In Europe, the dreadful details were often deliberately glossed over in favor of a more palatable narrative of heroism and divine favor. Minstrels sang of valiant knights and glorious valor, smoothing out the gruesome truth to fit noble legends. Such romanticized memories cast the knights as saviors within the grand tapestry of God's will. Conversely, the Islamic world carefully preserved the bitter lessons of the siege, weaving it into their historical consciousness as a narrative of martyrdom, resilience, and enduring resistance. These memories were fanned like embers in a fire, continuously feeding into future grievances and ambitions for retribution. As generations stood on this historical divide, the cultural memory painted by each side deepened the rifts that threaded through the stories whispered across campfires and painstakingly scribed onto parchment. The legacy of Jerusalem's fallen cries serves as a stark testament to the enduring and devastating impact of religious fanaticism, a bloody specter haunting every future crusade that would follow. The streets, once literally steeped in blood, lingered as a powerful memory, shaping interactions between Christians and Muslims for generations to come. The siege's specter, a ghost of idealistic fervor and horrific atrocity intertwined, continued to hover over future endeavors of conquest and faith, a burdensome legacy etched indelibly into the chronicles of human folly. Above all, the siege left individual lives shredded and raw. Survivors were forever marked by that brutal encounter. Crusaders, once carried forward by visions of divine ecstasy, found themselves wrestling with the hollow triumphs and bitter, lingering regrets. Those harsh days carved deep into their souls, leaving enduring, unseen wounds. It was a somber reminder of the vast chasm between lofty ideals and grim, unforgiving realities. History whispered of unspoken acts of compassion amidst the brutality, small beacons of humanity cast against a vast storm of ambition and aggression. The events of 1099 linger in today's echoes, a cautionary tale warning us of the inherent perils in blurring deeply held beliefs with violent conflict. Their legacy offers a mirror reflecting our own struggles and triumphs, challenging us to untangle the complex dance between devotion and morality in the intricate tapestry of our shared existence. As we peer into this mirror, the shadows of the past prompt us to grapple with the gravity of belief-driven endeavors in our contemporary world. In the aftermath of the siege, Jerusalem lay in haunting silence. Its once bustling streets were eerily devoid of life. The air, previously thick with the clash of swords and the cries of those caught in the chaos, now carried only the ghostly echoes of a city brutally subdued. Crusaders roamed through this grim tableau, navigating between charred buildings and scattered bodies. Each step was a stark reminder of the divine justification that had driven them to such extremes. For these warriors, victory was seen as undeniable proof of their moral superiority, a paradoxical testament to their faith in martial prowess that would ripple through history with an unsettling impact. Crusader chroniclers penned the siege's end with a mixture of reverence and horror. It was perceived as a fulfillment of prophecy, a divinely sanctioned cleansing of a sacred city believed to be overrun by non-Christian presences. Yet while the physical structure of the city could eventually be rebuilt, its soul bore wounds not so easily mended. The transformation of Jerusalem set a grisly precedent, redefining future conquests more as ideological crusades than as mere battles for land and glory. The social fabric, a once vibrant tapestry woven from diverse cultures and religions, was utterly shredded, leaving the survivors grappling with shattered identities in a city that now felt alien and hostile. Life for Jerusalem's indigenous inhabitants changed irrevocably under this new Latin Christian rule. Indigenous institutions crumbled, replaced by a new order marked by pervasive suspicion and heavy imposition. Converts often faced coercion, and many found themselves enslaved or forcibly displaced from their homes. For some, survival meant the humiliating fate of serving the very knights who had raised their world. For others, it was a precarious dance of appeasement and grim endurance within a transformed demographic landscape, a reality that resonated across centuries. The conquest profoundly reshaped regional dynamics, underscoring the deep and lasting influence of forced cultural transitions. Beyond the immediate victory, the First Crusade left a complex legacy etched across the Holy Land. It heralded the tumultuous birth of the Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem and marked the undeniable onset of European colonialism in the Levant. Western nobles cast their feudal shadows over the conquered territories, imprinting them with legal, economic, and cultural norms akin to those of their distant homelands. In this strange new world where warriors transformed into rulers, a delicate and often brutal dance of domination and exchange unfolded, leaving indelible marks on both the conqueror and the conquered. Moreover, this conquest sparked a fervent zeal that hardly cooled with the passage of time. The success at Jerusalem inspired generations of future crusaders, shaping a paradigm where engaging in holy war promised both spiritual absolution and tangible worldly gain. Pope Urban II's initial rallying cry reverberated through Europe for years to come, becoming a powerful call to arms that appealed to both noble aspirations and opportunistic ambitions alike. These crusaders, often idealized as models of romanticized heroism in later narratives, carried forward a legacy fraught with a dangerous mix of noble intentions and inevitable tragedy. Jerusalem's new status as a major Christian pilgrimage center dramatically revitalized its sacred allure. The Crusaders redefined the city's sacred geography, erecting churches and repurposing Islamic holy sites into Christian dominions. Pilgrims arrived in throngs, seeking spiritual fulfillment even as their presence fueled an economic resurgence of inns, markets, and related services. Yet this bustling pilgrimage also sowed the seeds of future conflict and contention over sacred sites, drawing stark lines that would shape medieval struggles for centuries. The siege also vividly revealed the power of military innovation driven by necessity. Crusaders discovered incredible resilience and ingenuity through necessity, crafting impressive siege engines and blending European military methodologies with valuable insights gleaned from their adversaries. This military metamorphosis provoked a similar response from the Islamic world, which in turn refined its own strategies and fortifications in defense. Such cross-cultural exchanges, surprisingly, propelled technological advancement, etching new realities into the annals of military history. Economically, the siege's ripples reached far beyond Jerusalem's walls. As Crusaders forged new trade routes from Europe to the Orient, Italian maritime republics like Venice and Genoa shrewdly capitalized on their seafaring prowess to secure valuable exchanges. This burgeoning trade brought coveted spices and silks to European markets, fostering the growth of a nascent merchant class. Yet these economic gains came at a significant cost to local economies, which were often crippled by displacement and instability. It was a harsh reminder of conquest's dual nature, where fortune for some often walked hand in hand with profound misfortune for others. Religiously, the conquest cast a long and complex shadow, starkly illustrating the zenith of medieval religious extremism. The fervor that fueled the Crusaders' actions, a potent, volatile blend of unwavering faith and brutal violence, echoed through the ages, crafting enduring narratives of enmity and fostering deep cultural distrust between Christian and Muslim worlds. This legacy, a cautionary tale of unchecked dogma spiraling into intolerance, invites crucial reflection on the enduring need for dialogue, understanding, and mutual respect in our own time. Amidst the chaos of war, a paradoxical exchange of culture also unfolded. Crusaders, unexpectedly confronted by Eastern medicine, sciences, and philosophies, experienced a surprising intellectual awakening that would later contribute significantly to the European Renaissance. Unfortunately, this enriching exchange was often marred by entrenched stereotypes and prejudices, reducing a complex and sophisticated society to simplistic caricatures. Yet even in the throes of intense hostility, these exchanges yielded moments of mutual enrichment, a testament to human resilience and curiosity amidst adversity. In capturing Jerusalem, Western Christendom forcefully asserted its presence onto the global stage, marking a significant shift from insular kingdoms to more expansive, outward-looking empires that would soon explore even further horizons. Conversely, in the Muslim world, Jerusalem's fall served as a powerful catalyst for unity, rallying disparate factions under formidable figures like Saladin, inciting a revival as fervent and determined as the initial crusading thrust. This ongoing struggle, echoing across the centuries, underscores Jerusalem's enduring role as both a crucible of intense confrontation and a beacon of remarkable, enduring resilience. With the close of this tumultuous chapter, one cannot help but marvel at the incredibly complex and multifaceted legacy of conquest, a legacy as storied and profound as Jerusalem itself. Our journey through history beckons you to delve deeper into this vast and intricate tapestry, to explore, to question, and to seek understanding. For in understanding the past perhaps lies a glimmer of insight into the future. If this tale has sparked your curiosity or stirred your imagination, do not miss the upcoming stories. Like and subscribe and join us on this immersive journey into history's compelling, challenging, and ever-relevant embrace.